So this is part 2, again, based on the book by Chris Holman. I've got 5 copies here. If you're interested in this book, send me a message. I'll send you a copy. You can get this on Amazon, but I do have some copies here that I'm happy to send your way. This book has been a game changer for me in how I do meetings. I think I cannot recommend it more, and that's one of the reasons why we're taking a little bit of time here and working through this, okay? So we're going to do a part 2 today. Part 1 in review, we talked about, talking less, listening more. We talked about pausing a little bit, just even pausing 3 seconds after they speak, pausing a little bit after you speak, that using that silence, it may seem awkward, but it just creates space, and it creates space for that prospect to think and really start interacting with you instead of just reacting to everything you're telling them. Trade statements for questions. The study that was done in this book with 100 different prospect meetings, it was something ridiculous that, like, I don't know, the stat was really high where the advisor talks the most of the time, and in my experience, that never works well. Reflecting back to them what you hear, mirroring them. So as you're writing notes down, I heard you say this, I heard you say this. People want to feel heard, right? The 5th thing we talked about is simplifying things. Don't persuade them. Just make that path forward so clear. We're not here to try to persuade people. We're here to just simplify this process for them, okay? And then number 6, how do we get better at this? We record our calls. We review them. We reflect on them. We take feedback on them. We're all using note takers, right? Your note taker will actually give you a lot of stats on who talked the most and things like that. You can even take, and I know Chris Wilbrat shared about this, you can take your call and pop it into, a Claude or something like that and say, help me, I'm trying to talk less, I'm trying to ask more questions, I'm trying to engage more. How could I improve this? So that's how we get better at these things, okay? All right. Because there's really 3 things that every prospect is wanting to answer when they meet with you, okay? There's really 3 things. And the first 2 are the most important. Do I like you, and do I trust you? If you don't answer those questions, it's not going to matter how great your process is. It's not going to matter what you do, how amazing, whatever that shiny thing is that you've got for them, or how much you can help them. You have to answer first. Do I like you, and do I trust you? And we talked about that. You can look at the last call if you missed it. Today, we're going to get into question 3. Can you actually help me with my problem and what I'm trying to do? So let's talk a little bit. Why do prospects hold back? Well, why don't they just come into a discovery meeting and tell you everything? And I think one of the reasons why is we in this business are very objective. We're like a doctor, right? I mean, if you think about a doctor that, they've seen everything. So nothing typically scares them or anything like that. But if you have to, expose something for a doctor to examine, you're sitting there going, this is very uncomfortable for me. I don't do this. But the doctor's like, I've seen 30 of these, whatever that is. I've seen 30 of these today. It's not a big deal. It's the same thing with money. Money is an emotional thing with people. And so we have to understand that when we meet with a prospect, they very well there might be some identity and emotion, and they might be protecting something, and there may be some hesitation because maybe they're fearful that you might judge them, or is this really a safe place for me to share? Okay, so you're popping through your questions, but we have to understand where this person is coming from, and they very well may hold back on fully answering those questions. I know I have gone through a discovery meeting where I thought we put everything out on the table, only to discover maybe in that 2nd or 3rd meeting they were holding some really, really important things back. So we have to do a good job, right? Fear of judgment, shame and isolation. They don't want to be pressured or interrogated. One of the things that I have found, and this book as well talks about, that has helped, is when they share something, because a lot of times they'll share, well, here, can you look at what I'm spending money on? Like, can you see this? I mean, should I be spending money on these things, right? Or, man, I didn't really do this. One of the best things I think you can say is, a lot of people I work with are facing the same thing. You're not in the boat alone. There's a lot of other people that we've helped. There's a lot of other people going through the same thing that you're going through. I mean, just telling somebody that they are going through the same thing and you've dealt with that before can help really relax and help bring out more openness. By the way, as I'm talking through this, please, if you've got a question, pop your mic on and throw it out on one of these slides or something like that. We don't have to wait all the way to the end, but if you've got something you want to have a question on, I mean, we do have a limited amount of time, but please, I want to make sure we are keeping this somewhat conversational. Okay. So, and the other thing here, which we've talked a lot about is, leading with that warmth, not competence. I always, when I do a prospect meeting, I start asking them questions. The very last thing I'm going to do is tell them what we do and how we help people, and that's always at the end. And I think a lot of times we can lead with that. Well, here you go, and thanks for meeting with us, and we're XYZ Financial, and here's what we do, and here's our process, and here's how it works, and here's how it is. You have to lead with the warmth piece. You have to ask the good questions. You have to answer the questions of, do I trust you and do I like you, before you can get to this place of, well, let me tell you how we help people like you. All right. So let's talk a little about, kind of how we design a trust-centered discovery meeting and what goes into it. Okay. This, I'm calling it the old meeting here on the left, designed to extract, right? We bring an agenda in. Let's get the fact finder out here. Let's get all your numbers in here. Let's assess, well, are they going to be a good fit or not? Let's decide on next steps, and let's boom, 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 and let's go. And those meetings are designed to really just extract information out and can be very transactional. I mean, there's still things, we still need to get some numbers and things like that. But we want to really design a meeting that's designed to give, right? Let's really flesh out their experience. Where are they really at right now? How do I give them confidence in this process? How can I even give them a little control? Give them some options. Let them choose. Let them feel like they're being heard, even whether they hire you or not. All right. So that is our goal here, right? The interrogation is too cold, checklist style. What's your income? Do you have a will? What's your this? How about that? This. Prospect usually feels processed, right? But then there's the other end of the spectrum, right? We call this the coffee date. It's warm and conversational. We just build rapport, and oh my gosh, this was such a nice meeting, but we haven't really helped them. So it's really trying to find that mixture, if you want to say, or that balance between, we want to provide a lot of safety to them so they can share, and we want to also provide structure. And how we do that is just very thoughtful, open-ended questions. Also, we tell some stories too, which we're going to get in here in a minute, but we just give them room to breathe, and it doesn't feel scripted. Okay. It's still okay to have an agenda. Don't get me wrong, but we don't want that agenda to be very like they're feeling processed and interrogated. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about thought-provoking questions. Of these 100 meetings that Chris Holman did here in this book, they found that 90% of the questions that advisors asked were closed-ended. Okay. Let's get the data. Let's get the answer, and let's move on. Thought-provoking questions slow things down, invite reflection. They open the door to the story behind the fact. So we can gather all the facts that we want, but if we don't get a good idea of what the story is behind that, a lot of times that will put us behind the game. Okay. So, and I think one thing, if you ask a good question and your prospect pauses for a minute to think how they're going to answer that, I feel like that's a massive win. That's a huge win, because now they're thinking, and now you're really getting into that discovery, right? So, are you worried about money, running out of money? Do you have a retirement plan? What are your goals? What are your this, right? Let's change. All we have to do is just change some verbiage, right? What would financial peace of mind look for you? Who are you with when you describe me your perfect retirement? Who are you with? What are you doing? Where are you at? What would have to be true for you to feel financially secure? If you had to choose between retiring early, leaving a legacy, which feels more important, and why, right? Then, I think a lot of times we leave the why out. We ask what, and sometimes we don't want to ask why. And why, to me, is really where the rubber meets the road here, because now you're finding out how they're wired and what the story is, right? And another thing we need to do is after we ask questions, right, and they give an answer, what else? Anything else? How did you come to feel that way? I like how did you come to feel that way a little better than why, because sometimes why can be a little abrupt. So another way to ask that is, how did you come to feel that way? It's the same thing as asking, why do you feel that way? One question to avoid is, and I've been guilty of this, is, well, how can we help you? What can we, like client sits down, maybe you don't know, maybe they say, well, how can we help you? What's on your mind? How can we help? How can I help you? Right. And it's not the best way because it centers the advisor, right? How can I, so tell me what I need to be doing, right? And also it assumes like, well, they have their problem all figured out. They have the clarity, they know what their problem is, they've got it all figured out, and now they just need to tell me what I need to do to help them. And that's, if you've been doing this long enough, you'll know that 99.9% of the time, that is not the case, right? So we want to ask these open-ended questions. And we'll get we're getting a little more into like some specifics around this. I thought about, and maybe we'll do this, create a bank of questions. I actually have a document with like 75 questions in it that, I used to have just kind of in my pocket. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, other than just because what we really want to have is a natural conversation. But when we're asking questions, we typically will ask just one question. And that is, in this example here, what's your biggest concern about retirement? So it names the worry and they're going to share it. But at that point, this is my biggest concern, right? You're just at that surface level, right? So what's the follow-up to that? Well, tell me why that's important to you. Now we're getting deeper, right? We're going to connect to something. And then, what makes that a top priority? So now we're going to find like, what's the value or fear underneath that? And sometimes just why is that important to you will get us to that place. But layering those questions is very important to really discover the need behind the need. Let's talk a couple of minutes here about using personal stories to build emotional trust, because stories are very, very powerful. Humans are neurologically wired for story. We are, okay? A relevant story makes the listener feel something, and it'll make them feel fast. It also shows them, personal narratives will show that we have empathy, that we understand. And it also, if you're willing to share a story and just be a little bit transparent, it opens up those neural circuits to say, I think I can trust this person. This person's safe. They're sharing something with me. Okay. Stories work, but stories, just as much as they work, they can go overboard, right? So they're simply a bridge. They're not a detour in what we're doing. The best time to share a story is after they've opened up. Okay. It should echo something that they have shared, not steer the conversation to something new. So it should be about something specifically about them. It should only be about a minute or two, right? A 5 to 10 minute story about how you went through this time of your life, whatever. And I'm guilty of this because I overshare way too much. And so I have been very guilty of sharing stories and getting off track. They need to be really short. And then you let the story land and then ask, like, how does that compare to what you've been thinking about? Don't assume that your story, because this has happened to all of us. You'll share something and then someone will go into the story about maybe something that they've done. And you're sitting there and you're like, that has nothing to do with what I just shared with you. Why are you sharing this with me? So don't always assume, but when it does connect, and it's still any story you share, and I'll go to this next slide because this talks about it. You don't want to overshare. You don't want to show off with it, but the self-test, I love this. If you're telling a story because you need to say it, pause. You don't say it. If you're telling it because they need to hear it, because it's about them, because it's helping bridge that gap or kind of where they're at and what they've shared, you're in the right place to share a story. Okay, we are moving along here. Just a few more slides. We're making great time. Any questions, thoughts, comments so far? All right, so how do we demonstrate true competence and credibility in that discovery meeting? Again, and I know I've said this a bunch of times, warmth comes first. Do I like you and do I trust you? You have to answer those two questions first before you talk about how amazing your firm is and how you can help them. Technical skill doesn't win trust. Prospects must feel heard, respected, emotionally safe before they'll absorb whatever expertise you're bringing to the table. Okay. So we have to lead with that first. So step one, clarify their concerns. And this is where that mirroring gets back, repeating what they've said, like we've asked a lot of questions. So before you talk about what you do in your process and how you help, it has to tie to them personally. It can't be like, we've helped 500 families and our firm has done this and we've done that and we're doing this and that and all these things. Doesn't matter. It's just all they care about is how does this affect me, right? So clarify their concerns. Say it back to them. I heard you say that you're concerned about this. I heard you say, you said 3 times, Mr. Johnson, that these things are important to you, right? Okay. And I've heard you this. Great. Let me now talk about how we help people in situations like yours. We have a process, right? And here's how it works. And here's how it's helped folks like you, right? Then outline what's next. All right. So if we decide to work together, here's how this is going to work, right? It's still always about them. It's not your, list of all the 30 wealth management things that you do amazingly or this or that. It's simply cater to what they're trying to accomplish there. Because you can go on and on and on about how amazing your investment process is and how your returns are, whatever that is. And their concerns I don't have a plan right now. And I need a plan because my kids are going away to college next year. I want to retire in 10 years, this, and that. So you're going on about your investment process. I don't have a plan, whatever that is, whatever your competence is and your process needs to reflect that. All right. All right. This is really good. I took this. This is obviously, this is everything I'm talking about is out of this book, but I really like the way that Chris in here talked about the 9 kind of people. And I wanted to run through this. I could not get these things to go in PowerPoint here the right way or on the same page. So I just went with it. But all right, the solo ager. So they're aging without family support, right? A question you definitely want to ask someone there. And these are just small examples. Who will you rely on most as you age, right? The analytical person, right? That engineer, they're data driven, they're results oriented, right? What data and insights would help you feel confident about our process? The emotionally driven person, right? What worries you most about your financial future, right? So they're emotionally, right? The delegator, look, I don't want to do this. I'm too busy doing this stuff over there. Great. So what level of involvement do you prefer in managing your finances? Let's define that, right? But then on the other end of the spectrum, the do-it-yourself investor, what would have to happen for you to see value in working with an advisor, right? So this is the person that's like, well, I've been doing this for the last 20 years. And, I think I may need to bring an advisor in because, I got all this money now. I'm not too sure. Great. Well, let's talk about this. What value you're looking for? What do you think? Let's define what I can bring to the table and what that looks like in your world. And then there's 4 other people, the sudden wealth recipient, right? Somebody gets an inheritance and, great. What's your biggest concern about managing this new wealth? The overwhelmed caregiver. So they're balancing family, finances. So maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a parent now that they're having to care for. The crisis-driven person, they're reacting, oh my gosh, this is happening. What am I going to do? We got to get this done. And then of course the value-based investor, right? Purpose over profits. And I've had many clients like this, like money doesn't matter to them, but they want to impact certain things in their life and in their family and in the world. What impact will your wealth have for you and your family in the world? So I think these are really good 9, I would take these 9 things and kind of create a, maybe just some questions around that. You'll know if you're asking the right questions, what somebody falls into there. And then that really allows you to start getting personal and customize for what they're wanting. Okay. All right. So we said that, when we show our competence, we're trying to simplify things and bring clarity. So how do we get them to actually commit to something? So let's talk a little bit about why prospects freeze, okay? And most prospects aren't resisting or freeze because they doubt your value. They're hesitating because anytime you meet with a prospect, what are you asking them to do? You're asking them to change. They have to make a change to start working with you, right? And change does not feel comfortable at all. So when you're demonstrating, first of all, when you answer the question, they like you and they trust you, you're demonstrating your competence. You have to help figure out what is it here. They're going to make a change, right? Are they, a lot of times, well, I've been working with this person for 15 years. I know they're not good for me. I know that, but you know what? It's like, oh, I got to change, do this. It's going to be something new. There's loss aversion, right? Losses feel much stronger than gains. Okay. And people will go 10 times out, 10 times out of the way to avoid a loss than try to do something for a gain. And if I start working with you, there's uncertainty, right? There's also an endowment, what we call the endowment effect, where a lot of times we overvalue what we already have because I know what I've got. I know this is here. And because I know it, will overvalue it. When there's really something 10 times better here, we'll overvalue that. And then, of course, the cognitive dissonance here, where conflicting beliefs are uncomfortable, right? So we avoid the conflict. I got to go tell this person, or I got to go now tell somebody that I don't want to work with them anymore. Or I got to leave, or I'm doing this, or I'm making a change, or I'm going here, right? People don't like to say no, and they don't like conflict. So they'll just avoid it. If we don't try to recognize these things, we end up spinning our wheels. We end up wasting our time. We're not, emails start getting unanswered. People start, giving you the silent treatment. We've all had this happen to us, right? So we've got to figure that out. So when we're in discovery, we're not necessarily selling change. We're just helping them uncover why they may want it for themselves, right? So, look how we can improve your portfolio. I mean, your risk score is this, and you're taking all this risk, and your performance hasn't been great, and da 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 da, right? Like, we can tell them that all day long, but what if they came to that risk? What we need them to do, us telling them that doesn't necessarily get them to realize it themselves. So how can we ask better questions around that, right? Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, what might it cost you to keep it the way it is? I mean, we've shown you some numbers here, but help me understand, like, what do you think it will cost you if you keep that portfolio there? Wow, you haven't updated your strategy in 10 years. And when was the last time you did a financial plan? And we can do this and do this, right? Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, have you thought about how, taxes and not planning for them can impact your income? And then shut up and listen, right? A lot of times we want to recommend a path. Okay, we'll do this, and here's the next step, and you do this, 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 and that. I've started asking this more and more because when I get to the end of a discovery meeting, I want to be like, well, let's schedule the next. If I know someone's going to be a good fit and we can help them, I'm like, let's schedule this call, and let's do this, and let's do this, right? And I've started asking this question. I'm like, what do you feel would be a good next step for us? And then I shut up. And I don't know what they're going to say. They might say, well, why don't we meet in a month? Or why don't we, blah, 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 or whatever. But it lets them feel in control, and it increases that trust level there. And I have found that by asking that question, what do you feel would be a next good step for us, leads to more positive outcomes. And then here, just kind of summing this slide up. When a prospect can name the issue, they'll take ownership of it. When you name it for them, that doesn't necessarily mean it. When you can ask the right questions and they can name the issue themselves, they typically will take ownership of it. And that helps in getting them to make the change. Again, just like I was saying earlier, leave the decision in their hands. What do you feel would be a good next step? Would it be helpful to explore how we might work together? Okay. So you've talked, you've asked questions, you've clarified some things, and just say, would it be helpful at this point in the meeting for me to go ahead and just share how we might work together and what that looks like for you? It's permission based, right? They can say yes or no. They're not going to say no, but it just allows them to feel safe. And then what timeline makes sense for you? Okay, so, if there is a timeline, or maybe you've given them some options, again, we guide without pushing. We just give them something, a space to decide for themselves. All right. So key takeaways here. Oh, what just happened there? All right. Can you guys see this here? All right. Key takeaways here. Again, if they hold back, lead with empathy, not data. They're trying to protect something tender. So if they're holding back, don't just take a step back. Let's get back to building that warmth and giving them a safe place. We want to build a meeting that's designed to give, not to extract. We don't want to be transactional. Layer our questions. When you're asking questions, what does retirement look like? What is it? Make sure we follow each question up. Why is that important to you? What makes that a priority for you? Dig deeper. Stories are bridges, not detours. Brief, relevant, and it's only after they've opened up about something. Then bridge it back. Use a story to bridge it back to them. Process is the proof of competence, right? Clarify, explain our approach, but it has to be tied to what they specifically want. And then help them name their issue. Let them take ownership of it. All right. And then that's it. You don't show your value by leading with what you know. You show it by creating a space where the client can show theirs. All right. So I'll stop there.